You think power is about being surrounded, friends leaning in, advisors nodding, allies raising their glasses when you succeed. You imagine the throne is warm, the crown is heavy but shared. You're wrong. Dead wrong. The higher you rise, the lonelier the air becomes. Not because you reject people, because you must, because survival demands it. And survival is the only currency that matters at the summit. Everyone falls, except those who build fortresses, not castles of stone and iron, but walls of silence, distance, and ruthless calculation. That's the real throne. Niccolo Machiavelli knew it 500 years ago when he whispered into the ears of princes. And every modern CEO, general, or head of state who lasts longer than a news cycle follows the same manual quietly, without admitting it. Power doesn't forgive innocence. Power doesn't reward trust. At that level, trust is a luxury you can't afford, because when your neck is on the line, everyone else is holding the knife. Think about it. When was the last time you saw a president, a billionaire, or a warlord laughing freely among equals? Not staged photographs, not curated press moments. Real laughter, real vulnerability, real trust. You haven't, because it doesn't happen. Not at the top. At the top, strategy replaces intimacy, and strategy never laughs. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to teach kindness. He wrote it to teach survival. And survival at that altitude requires isolation, not by chance, but by design. Every person close to you is a potential dagger, no matter how wide their smile. Loyalty? Prove it. And even then, don't believe it. Because loyalty shifts with money, with fear, with opportunity. That's not cynicism, it's neuroscience. Our brains are wired for self-preservation, and when push comes to shove, people will abandon principle for survival. Understanding that isn't pessimism, it's armor. Naivete? That's the uniform of the dead. Picture Florence in 1513. A man in exile, stripped of power, watches the Medici family seize control of the city he once served. His name is Niccolo Machiavelli, and what he's writing is not philosophy, not ethics, a survival guide, a manual for rulers who don't want to wake up in a ditch with their throat cut. In chapter 17, he delivers the line that echoes through centuries. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. You've heard it. Everyone has. But almost no one understands it. It isn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It's control. Love is conditional, fragile, and fleeting. Fear is reliable. Love whispers behind your back. Fear polices itself. That's the first brick in the fortress. And here's the irony. Those who rise high enough don't even need to read Machiavelli. They become him. Watch any CEO after a mass layoff. Watch any president after a scandal. Watch any general after betrayal. Do they weep in public? Rage? Beg? No, they remain silent, unmoved. Not because they're soulless, but because displaying pain is displaying weakness. And weakness is blood in the water. Show pain, and the wolves move in. You've been told power comes from charisma, speeches, handshakes, applause. That's a lie. Power lives in restraint, in silence that unnerves, in ambiguity that forces others to wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, because the moment they believe they know, the countdown begins for your replacement. Consider Julius Caesar. He entered the Senate, flanked by allies, comrades, men he had fought alongside, laughed with, trusted. 23 stab wounds later, those allies became executioners. Brutus, the protege he loved like a son, drove the final blade. People romanticize Caesar's last words, "Et tu, brute." But the real tragedy isn't betrayal. It's that he didn't heed Machiavelli's truth. The moment you start believing in guaranteed loyalty, you're already dead. And today, nothing has changed. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Putin, Xi Jinping, Biden, Trump. Different ideologies, same blueprint. Layers of gatekeepers, isolation by design, controlled access. Because every conversation is a potential leak, every friendship a liability. You call it paranoia, they call it survival. Because paranoia is the tax of sovereignty. Loneliness? Yes. But loneliness is the cost of not being buried. Here's the secret. Powerful people don't suffer loneliness. They choose it. They engineer it. They cut ties before those ties can strangle them. They stop confiding after the first betrayal. They stop sharing dreams after the first time someone weaponizes them. And you think that's sad? Maybe. But would you rather be adored and destroyed, or feared and alive? Take Steve Jobs, visionary, genius, admired by millions, trusted by almost no one. Read his biography, talk to his colleagues. He humiliated allies, fired friends, swapped out his inner circle like disposable tools. Why? Because he knew creativity requires control, and control requires distance. In 1985, his own company turned against him. His creation exiled him. And what did he do? He built something else, returned, and reclaimed his throne. And when he came back, he never allowed anyone close again. Not even his family, not even his doctors. His isolation wasn't tragedy, it was strategy. The fortress, fully built. And now, ask yourself, what about the cost? The toll on the psyche, the insomnia, the paranoia, the aching solitude, all real. But here's the brutal truth. Power doesn't care about your happiness. It only cares about your effectiveness, your unpredictability, your ability to stand alone while others crumble. Happiness is for those who clock out at 5, who hug their children and forget about work. Power is war, 24/7. And in war, you don't get to be soft. You don't get to be understood. You don't get to be loved. You get to be feared, respected, obeyed, alone. And yet, here lies the paradox. The deeper your solitude, the sharper your clarity. The fewer voices in your ear, the more objective your vision. Silence creates control. Detachment forges dominance. That's why kings never have best friends. Why generals don't host dinner parties with battle plans. Why billionaires never reveal their true thoughts on social media. Every word is a weapon. Every silence, a shield. The real secret? Powerful people are not alone because they failed at relationships. They are alone because they mastered strategy. They learned that every person admitted into their inner circle is a potential exit wound for their power, and so they let no one in. Not fully, not ever. That isn't weakness. That is the ultimate strength, the choice of control over comfort, of survival over sentiment. Cold? Yes, but so is betrayal, so is the grave, and so is the smile of the ally preparing to sell you out for a better deal. Look around. How many leaders retire on their own terms? How many CEOs step down unscathed? Almost none. The ones who do, they learned early. Trust is a liability. Distance is armor. Silence is survival. That's the fortress. The walls aren't made of stone. They're made of restraint, of unreadability, of the willingness to stand alone while the crowd is cheering. And if you're not ready for that, stay where you are, because the summit is colder, emptier, quieter than you think. And that's exactly how the rulers like it. The fortress of power isn't built to shut the world out. It's built to keep power in. And its mortar is silence, distance, and the ruthless ability to shed people before they become liabilities. You don't lose people as you climb. You shed them, like anchors disguised as allies, like weight pretending to be support. Every handshake, every favor, every secret you share, these are not bonds, they're threads. And the higher you climb, those threads tighten into nooses. Machiavelli knew this. He watched rulers choke on applause, drown in loyalty, bleed out on the marble floors of palaces, surrounded not by enemies, but by smiling faces who toasted them the night before. And what conclusion did he reach? Not sorrow, clarity. Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous. Not some men, not most, all of them, especially the ones closest to you. Harsh? Yes, but reality isn't kind. Reality doesn't deal in fairness. Reality deals in consequences, and the consequence of misplaced trust at the top is exile, disgrace, or death. Yesterday, it was daggers in the dark. Today, it's leaked emails, shareholder revolts, whispered scandals, media campaigns, anonymous betrayals. different tools, same game. The survivors play it one way, alone. Take Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, surrounded her entire reign by suitors, nobles, advisors, all clamoring for her hand, her trust, her throne. She gave none of them what they wanted. She flirted, delayed, promised, and withheld. She turned solitude into leverage, her unmarried state into political power. She understood that a husband meant a rival, an heir meant instability, intimacy meant vulnerability, so she chose distance. Her solitude wasn't weakness, it was her sword. While kings around her were overthrown by wives, sons, and brothers, Elizabeth reigned for 45 years. She died alone, but on her own terms, in her own bed, still feared, still untouchable. That isn't tragedy, that's mastery. The fortress strategy works, and it works beyond monarchy. CEOs know it, generals know it, startup founders know it. Even coaches and artists who last in their fields understand the rule. Proximity is danger. The moment someone believes they're entitled to your time, your trust, your ear, they start believing they're entitled to your position, and entitlement is the seed of betrayal. Your CFO is loyal until he's offered more. Your VP is devoted until her ego is bruised. Your best friend is trustworthy until the price is high enough. Machiavelli never said people are evil. He said they are self-interested, and self-interest will always eclipse loyalty when survival or gain is on the line. That's not philosophy, that's evolutionary psychology. Humans evolved to prioritize their own tribe, their own genes, their own survival. Betrayal isn't an exception, it's the rule. Don't believe me? Look at Sam Bankman-Fried. Young, brilliant, charismatic, running a billion-dollar empire, surrounded by friends, open office, open books, open heart. He believed in trust, in transparency, in collaboration. And where is he now? In a federal prison, his closest allies testifying against him, his inner circle flipping on him one by one, his empire reduced to rubble. Why? Because he thought friendship and trust could replace strategy. Noble? Maybe? Naive? Absolutely. Machiavelli would have told him, lock the doors, limit access, and assume everyone is lying, especially the ones calling you brother. Contrast that with Warren Buffett. In his 90s, one of the wealthiest men alive, still feared, still respected, still in control. In his office, a small room, no entourage, no hovering assistants, no PR team scripting his every move. He answers his own phone, reads his own mail, makes his own calls. He plays golf with friends, but never discusses deals. He smiles for cameras but reveals nothing of substance. He didn't become Warren Buffett by being liked. He became Warren Buffett by being unreadable, alone in the room, even when the room is full. That's the fortress, not made of cash, made of silence. And here's the deeper truth. The fortress is not physical, it's psychological. It's the discipline to sit in a crowded room and remain detached, to hear betrayal and show no flicker of pain, to hear threats and respond with stillness. That's power. Not the speeches, not the charisma, not the applause. Stillness, silence, unreadability. That's what makes others hesitate. That's what breeds awe. And awe fear's refined cousin is what keeps rulers safe. Because uncertainty is the sharpest blade. When people can't predict you, they can't outmaneuver you. And uncertainty is born in solitude. That's why powerful people bury emotions deep. Not because they lack them, but because emotions are leverage others can use. Anger is predictable. Tears are exploitable. Love is a distraction. Joy, weakness. Vulnerability is an open door. And at the top, every open door is an invitation for knives. Does that sound inhuman? Maybe. But so is the environment they operate in. The arena of power doesn't reward humanity. It rewards control. And control requires detachment. Neuroscience shows us that emotions drive behavior. But if you want to control others, you must first control yourself. And the easiest way to control yourself is to sever the ties that pull on your emotions. That's the fortress. The people who crave connection rarely last at the top. Not really, not for long. Because Connection requires compromise, and compromise is the first crack in the wall. Compromise makes you listen when you should act. Compromise makes you soften when you should strike. Compromise makes you care when you should calculate. That's when the fall begins. Look at Winston Churchill, Lion of Britain, beloved now, but in his own time, hated. After leading his nation through war, he was voted out. Why? Because he was uncompromising, unreadable, and often unlikable. The people didn't trust him, didn't love him, but they needed him, and when they didn't need him anymore, they discarded him. Churchill didn't cry, didn't beg. He walked away, alone, because he understood power is rented, not owned. And the rent is paid in solitude, in sacrifice, in the willingness to be unloved as long as you are indispensable. That's the final layer of the fortress. The most powerful people aren't just isolated. They cultivate mystery. They deliberately choose to be misunderstood. They answer questions with riddles. They delay decisions. They vanish without explanation. Because clarity is vulnerability. The moment people think they understand you, they begin to predict you. And the moment they predict you, they can move against you. So you remain opaque, mysterious, silent. That's not incompetence. That's design. Machiavelli didn't say to be cruel. He didn't say to be hated. He said to be feared because fear lasts longer than love. And he said to avoid being hated because hatred grows from familiarity, from broken promises, from intimacy soured. But awe fear mixed with mystery that is untouchable. Awe keeps people from testing you. Awe makes them hesitate. Awe makes them obey. So, the next time you see a leader standing alone after scandal, silent after betrayal, unmoved while the world speculates, don't pity them. Don't call them cold. Don't wonder why they have no friends. Understand, they never lost their friends. They never had them. Not really. Allies, yes. Tools, yes. Assets, yes. But friends? Friends are liabilities. And at the summit, you don't collect liabilities. You eliminate them. That's the fortress, not a castle, a state of mind. Silence as mortar, distance as stone, and the willingness to stand alone while the world begs you to come down. Power doesn't care if you're tired, broken, or human. Power only cares if you are in control. And control is always a solitary mission. So, here's the question. Do you want to be loved, or do you want to be powerful? Because you can't have both. Not really. Not at the summit. Machiavelli knew it. History proves it. Every survivor at the top lives it daily. The fortress isn't made of comfort. It's built from subtraction, from removing variables, stripping away vulnerabilities, and eliminating threats, especially the ones who smile at you. Think about it. Every person you let in becomes a possible exit point for your power. Every conversation you have is another chance for your strategy to leak. Every bond is another weak link waiting to snap under pressure. That's why the fortress is minimal. It's subtraction, not addition. Machiavelli warned against drowning in popularity. He observed princes smothered by their own courts, intoxicated by applause, and lulled into believing affection meant security. And he watched them bleed for that mistake. Because love, at its core, is conditional. It requires constant feeding, endless compromise. It can be withdrawn in a moment, and when it is, the fall is swift. That's why the survivors, those who reign long, those who outlast rivals, don't seek to be loved. They cultivate awe, and awe is born from distance. Love grows from familiarity. Awe grows from mystery. Love crumbles under disappointment. Awe thrives in uncertainty. People hate what they know too well, but they fear what they cannot read. This isn't just politics, it's psychology. Cognitive biases shape how we respond to leaders. The halo effect makes us project virtue onto those we admire. The authority bias makes us defer to those who seem untouchable. But once a leader becomes familiar, once they expose flaws, biases flip. The availability heuristic makes us remember failures more vividly than successes. The negativity bias makes us dwell on mistakes. Familiarity turns charisma into contempt. That's why the fortress strategy matters. Distance protects perception. History offers endless proof. Look at Napoleon. When he was distant, mysterious, larger than life, Europe trembled. When he became too familiar, too human, eating with his soldiers, overexposing himself, respect eroded. Familiarity gave way to doubt, and doubt, once seated, multiplies faster than loyalty. Or look at modern leaders. The ones who last aren't the ones constantly explaining themselves. They're the ones who remain unreadable. Vladimir Putin rarely smiles in public, rarely reveals emotion. Xi Jinping disappears from public view for weeks at a time, leaving analysts guessing. Whether you admire or despise them doesn't matter. The strategy works. Mystery magnifies power. Contrast that with those who overshare. Leaders who constantly try to connect, to explain, to be relatable. They burn fast and bright, but they don't last. The moment they're understood, they're predictable. And predictable leaders are replaceable leaders. The Fortress teaches this. Clarity is vulnerability. Mystery is protection. Silence is strategy. And yet, here's the paradox. Solitude, the very thing that isolates, also strengthens. When you remove the noise of constant opinions, of advisors whispering, of friends demanding, you see the board more clearly. Neuroscience confirms it. Solitude enhances creative problem solving, increases objectivity, strengthens long-term planning. Leaders in isolation develop sharper strategies because they're not clouded by the emotional static of relationships. Think about Steve Jobs again. His solitude wasn't just about control, it was about clarity. He cut voices out so he could see the future no one else could. He wasn't slowed by consensus. He didn't compromise for comfort. And the result? Products that change the world. But don't mistake solitude for apathy. Powerful people feel rage, love, grief, often more intensely than most, but they bury it. Why? Because emotion is a lever others can pull. Reveal joy, and rivals know how to tempt you. Reveal grief, and enemies know where to strike. Reveal anger, and manipulators know how to bait you. To show emotion at the top is to hand your playbook to the opposition. So the Fortress demands suppression, not the absence of emotion, but its concealment, the poker face, the stillness, the calm in the storm. That's why silence is feared, because no one knows if silence hides weakness or a strike already planned. And here's the cruel irony. This kind of control looks cold from the outside. To ordinary people, it seems robotic, inhuman. But in the arena of power, it's the opposite. It's survival. Humanity is for art, for family, for love poems. Power doesn't reward humanity, it punishes it. Look again at leaders who tried to humanize themselves, to show vulnerability, to open up. How often did that end in downfall? How often did the world weaponize their honesty against them? Again, same game, new weapons. In ancient Rome, betrayal meant steel. Today, it's a viral clip, a leaked document, a rumor that spreads faster than truth. Humanity is always ammunition, and the only way to stay bulletproof is to remain unreadable. This is why, when you see leaders at the podium, silent after a scandal, emotionless after crisis, unmoved when accused, you shouldn't assume they feel nothing. You should assume they feel everything but reveal nothing. That is the Fortress discipline. That is the throne built of silence. Because in the end, power is not maintained by charisma, by friends, by networks. Power is maintained by subtraction, by mystery, by the willingness to walk alone, to resist the human need for connection, to choose sovereignty over intimacy. That choice breaks most people. But those it doesn't break, those are the ones history remembers. And here's the bitter truth. If you crave connection more than control, if you value love over survival, you'll never truly hold power. Not for long, because connection means compromise. And compromise is the first crack in the wall. And cracks in the Fortress are fatal. Power, at its core, is not about addition. It's about subtraction. The discipline to strip away comforts, softenings, illusions, until all that remains is clarity, control, and silence. That's why the Fortress isn't a castle. It's a state of mind. A fortress built not with stone, but with detachment, not with guards, but with restraint. The ability to hold your silence while the world screams for answers. The ability to vanish when others demand presence. The ability to remain unreadable when every instinct tells you to explain. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He didn't say, "Be cruel." He didn't say, "Be hated." He said, "Be feared, but not hated." Why? Because hatred grows from intimacy, from broken promises, from expectations betrayed. Hatred is personal. But awe, that cocktail of fear and mystery, keeps you safe. Awe keeps you untouchable. Awe keeps people from even trying. And awe is cultivated through distance. Leaders who remain opaque, who refuse to be fully known, who withhold just enough, those are the ones who last. Because people cannot hate what they cannot touch. They can only marvel. They can only hesitate. They can only obey. This is why rulers throughout history chose solitude, not out of accident, but out of strategy. Elizabeth I, Napoleon, Churchill, Jobs, they understood the fortress isn't about rejection. It's about leverage. Distance transforms loneliness into power. But what about the cost? The sleepless nights, the paranoia, the aching solitude. Yes, it costs everything. But that's the price of sovereignty, because sovereignty isn't free. It is rented in blood, in silence, in sacrifice, and the rent is always due. Look again at history. How many rulers died in their beds, on their own terms, still in control? Few. Most fell by betrayal, scandal, disgrace. The ones who endured learned the lesson. Trust no one, show nothing, play alone. This is why powerful people aren't surrounded by best friends. They're surrounded by allies, assets, tools. And when those tools dull, they're replaced. Harsh? Yes. But power isn't sentimental. Power doesn't care about your childhood friends, your college roommate, your loyal advisor. Power cares only about who can keep you alive one more day. That's the fortress. Eliminating liabilities dressed as loyalties. Understanding that every connection is a possible knife. That every confidant is a future witness. That every bond is a seed of betrayal, waiting for the right price, the right fear, the right opportunity. And this isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Social psychology calls it self-interest. Evolutionary psychology calls it survival. Machiavelli called it truth. People act for themselves. And if helping you helps them, good. If betraying you helps them more, they will smile as they cut your throat. That's why the survivors cultivate opacity. They don't clarify. They don't over-explain. They don't humanize. They let others wonder. They let uncertainty spread, because uncertainty is paralyzing. An enemy who knows nothing fears everything. The fortress is not built to protect your heart. It's built to protect your power. And power is jealous. It demands sacrifice. It demands you choose control over comfort, distance over intimacy, sovereignty over companionship. It demands you walk alone. And here lies the ultimate truth. The loneliness of power is not its cost. It is its foundation. You don't lose people as you rise. You cut them loose, one by one, until no one remains but you and the silence. And in that silence, you become untouchable. That's why kings never have best friends. Why generals dine alone. Why billionaires never reveal their true thoughts. Not because they're broken, not because they're incapable of love, but because love, at that level, is a liability. Connection is a risk, and risk, at the summit, is fatal. So when you see a leader standing alone at a podium, silent after scandal, unmoved after betrayal, don't pity them. Don't think they're victims of isolation. Understand, they chose it. They engineered it. They built the fortress themselves. And the mortar? Silence, distance, mystery, the refusal to let anyone in far enough to destroy them. This is the throne Machiavelli described, not a chair, not a crown. The throne is solitude, the crown is unreadability, the scepter is silence. And the fortress is the discipline to remain alone, even when your heart begs for connection, even when the world demands your humanity, even when you ache to be understood. Because power doesn't care if you're understood. It only cares if you endure. So ask yourself, what do you want? To be loved or to be powerful? Because you cannot have both. Not at the top, not, and survive. Machiavelli knew it. History proves it. And every survivor at the summit lives it. Alone, silent, unmoved, untouchable. That is not a warning. That is an invitation to choose, to understand, to build your own fortress. Not out of fear, out of strategy, out of clarity, out of the ruthless understanding that power doesn't belong to the likable. It belongs to the unreadable, the distant, the alone. And if you're ready for that, welcome to the real game. The one no one talks about. The one played in silence. The one won, not with friends, but with fortress.